Hey, here's another video from weldingtipsandtricks.com. Today we're going to be talking about old school TIG welding. Just hooking up an air-cooled scratch start TIG welding torch to an old stick welding machine. Alright, today we're going old school, and I really mean old school. I traded years ago, horse traded for a rectifier that you could hook a buzz box, AC buzz box welder up to and get DC current out of. And so when you got DC current, if you got a DC stick welder, you can do some crude TIG welding. And in fact, a whole lot of TIG welding, even today, is done with just a DC current power source and a scratch start TIG torch, usually with a valve on it so you can cut the argon on and off when you want. And how that works is when you you basically have your stinger that holds a stick rod. You have DC negative current. You clamp the stinger onto the tab on the end of this, on the other end of this TIG torch. The other hose hooks into an argon flow meter, which can be run 200-300 foot of hose to a tank somewhere. It's very portable. You can be up 10 bucks high on a scaffold welding or whatever. All you need is a TIG torch, flow meter, and a lead and a ground. So when you get ready to weld, you have your machine preset. You're not going to weld razor blades with this kind of welding. Although you can do more than you would think you would do sometimes. But you have your machine preset on the amperage, get ready to weld, you hook your current up to the tab on this thing, you turn your argon on, set your flow meter, you light off, either you rock the tungsten end touch and pull back, or just scratch it like a match, and you weld, and when you get done, you trail out and snap the arc out. Now you're always going to leave a oxidized gray place. It's kind of unavoidable. But on some things like piping, you can get away with it. You just come up on the wall, snap out, file that little area off, wire brush it, and it all cleans up good. Many X-ray welds are done this way. So this little rectifier here, I horse traded for it years ago, and I used it one time to build some kind of parts washer out of 16-18 gauge steel. It worked then. It's been through a flood. That little AC Lincoln buzz box has been soaked underwater. And this is the first time we turned it on since it's been through the flood, and works like a champ. So the little Lincoln AC Tombstone welders are rough and ready, and they probably sold more of those than any other one welding machine in the history of mankind. And there's a reason for it. They're just tough. And so we've got some crude TIG welding going on. I'm going to weld some sheet metal here. I'm going to scratch start and weld a little bit. Try to get a decent arc shot if I can reach around the camera. I'm feeling a little rough. It's been a whole week since I had the wisdom teeth out, but man, knocked me down. So, but you know, gotta get the video out, right? Do what I can. We hope it works. Someone had a lot of time on their hands making this rectifier, but it is a cart. It's a cart made to hold a buzz box on the bottom, and some heavy aluminum channel and some diodes, heat sink, a bunch of wiring to connect it all together. I'm not an electrician, so I can't really explain to you exactly how all that works. But I know diodes are kind of like check valves. They stop the flow of electricity in one direction, so they're able to convert AC to DC. And so the buzz box goes on this side. One leads your ground, one's your electrode, and they go through. The current goes through the rectifier, comes out the other side as DC. And these two leads, one of them hooks into your TIG torch. Just if you've got already a DC stick welder, you don't need that rectifier portion. This is a Miller Thunderbolt. It's a pretty common low-end DC stick welder. That works just fine too. But basically, the stick lead will just clamp on to the power cable of an air-cooled TIG torch, and then the only thing else you need is a flow meter coming off an argon tank, and this line just hooks in right to the bottom of the flow meter. So it's just as simple as that. One line clamps off to your lead, DC electrode negative. The other line on the torch plugs into your flow meter on your argon bottle, and now you've got a TIG welder. It's crude. There's no amperage adjustment. There's no on-off. You got live current on that tungsten all the time, but you can TIG weld.
you have to scratch start or rock the TIG, rock the electrode in, touch off, and then pull back like this. But if all you've got is a stick welder and you don't have a MIG and you want to weld some sheet metal, if you can get an air-cooled TIG torch and a flow meter and an argon bottle pretty cheap, you're off to the races with a crude TIG welder. It's not ideal. Tacking like this, every tack kind of takes a little bit of that point of the electrode off a little bit, so eventually after 2 or 3 starts you're dealing with a less than needle sharp electrode, but you learn to live with it. Now, if you got backing like this, you can light up on the backing even on thin metal and not melt the edges away. It gives you an extra few seconds to position your filler metal, so you can pull into the corner off the backing and then add filler metal and get going. So you can see the arc is relatively smooth. It's just that you don't have any control. You can't post-flow shield the bead when you're done. You can't taper off to prevent leaving a crater hole. All those best practice things. A foot pedal is just a whole lot better. You're going to want to get a foot pedal if you've already. This is strictly an option if you've already got a stick welder of getting your feet wet with TIG welding, being able to do some TIG welding without spending a fortune, because you can get a TIG torch, air-cooled TIG torch off eBay pretty cheap, and a flow meter and an argon bottle. You're going to have an argon bottle eventually, whether or not you upgrade anyway. So that's kind of a wash. And so for a few $100s, you can convert your stick welder to a TIG welder. Now, if you got a gap like this, you especially need some backing, and it helps to light up on the backing, and then add rod really quickly and get that going. But you see, it doesn't take very long to figure out the amperage settings that you need. I've got it set on about 60 amps on the buzz box, which is going to give me a little bit less amperage on the DC output side. So I've probably got about 50 amps going here, and it's close enough to make the adjustments with travel speed, and doesn't give me anything to write home about, but it does give me a decent crude TIG welder. If all I've got is a stick welder and I can TIG weld a tank, if I'm building a tank that needs to be watertight, a parts washer or something like that, I'd rather do this than stick weld it. Now, probably a 115 volt MIG would be the way to go, but you know, this is just a demo on crude TIG welding. You light up, you snap out, and also you can use backing and weld right off onto the backing and snap out. Again, the arc itself is pretty smooth. You can make up your adjustments. You can see it's not way out of hand on the heat control. Also, you can see a crater hole. That would be a problem. You got to always make sure to light up and overlap and fill those, remelt those craters if you are building something that needs to be watertight. There, I tried to strike off like a match. I'm a little out of practice on the old scratch start. I've done quite a bit of this, but it's been over 20 years. You kind of spoiled to the foot pedal now. It gives you something decent. It just really makes you want a foot pedal, is what it does. Now, again, this is an option that you'd only want to do if you already had a stick welder. You wouldn't want to go out and buy a used stick welder and then buy a torch, buy a flow meter, and all that kind of stuff. But by the time you got done, you could have bought a brand new inverter power source like this one here. This is about $650, and the reason I say that is because when you buy an inverter like this, a lot of times you get foot pedal, flow meter, stick electrode, accessories, you know, already kind of thrown in the deal. $650 for all this stuff, and all that stuff adds up really quickly. And you're going to want a foot pedal. So, but if you've already got an old stick welder laying around and want to get your feet wet, it's just an option. All right, thanks for watching. Visit weldingtipsandtricks.com.